In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be interviewing Mr. Andrew Pickering, Serie A commentator. We'll be doing a mid-season review, this week's Moggi, Moratti and Frog, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, e gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another year and another season and episode of Studio Inter. I'm your host Nima Tavallaey, wishing you welcome to this decade, which we hope will be much, much better than the previous one from an Inter point of view. But before we get to everything, let me introduce my panel. I'm joined all the way from Egypt this time around, the preview writer for SempreInter.com, Mr. Mohamed Nassar.
Hey everyone, I'm very happy, very excited about the new year, albeit a little disappointed after the weekend, but let's get this started.
Agreed. And we are also joined by a good friend from Toronto. He's an editor over at TSN, our own Luca Marelli, Mr. Michael Gallo.
Hey Mo, I bet you the weather is much nicer in Egypt than it is in Toronto right now.
I saw a video of Toronto and it literally made me freeze. Like I started feeling cold just looking at it.
It's a disaster, but I'm very happy to be back with you guys. I'm just hoping it's not another midfield injury we have on the cusp right now.
Hope you're right. And we're also joined by a very good friend. He's a commentator over at Il Nero e l'Azzurro, and he's also the president and founder of the I Love Marco Violi fan club, Mr. Fulvio Santucci.
Hi Nima, hi everyone. Happy New Year. It's a pleasure to talk to you from Italy, and it's a pleasure to talk to you in the middle of another Inter crisis.
Exactly, and I was thinking, for those of you who missed, Fulvio revealed over the Christmas break that he has an absolute amazing singing voice. I'll let Fulvio explain a little bit about that later in the show. And we are also joined for the first time. He's a commentator in English for this international broadcast from the Serie A. He's making a Studio Inter debut. He comes from what he calls the People's Republic of Stoke. Well, welcome to Studio Inter, Mr. Andrew Pickering.
I don't want you to correct you on that introduction, but it's the Democratic People's Republic of Stoke.
Sorry, it's the Democratic People's Republic of Stoke. That's the one. So, well, welcome anyway. Good to have you.
Cheers. Yeah, great to be here, and buon anno to everyone.
Nice one. Well, let's get things started. I mean, it's a midweek. The second part of the season is a day old, if we want to speak that way. And Juventus are 4 points clear. Inter are just behind them, and Lazio, if they win their game in hand, could actually go second and go past Inter. I've personally not believed 1 second that Inter were going to threaten Juventus or anyone was going to threaten Juventus for the title. Is that it now? Is the Serie A title race over, or do you see Lazio or even Inter being able to push Juventus to the wire?
No, I don't think it's over. I think we're just gone halfway through the season. I know at this time Juventus have this feeling of a sort of invincible force that will win the league somehow, whatever happens. But I think there's still a long way to go. I'm not sure this Juventus side are quite as mechanical at winning as under Allegri. So I don't think it's over. It's going to be very hard to displace them. But no, I think we've still got a title race on our hands.
Nice one. Well, Mo, did you have a question for Andrew?
Yeah, Andrew, I wanted to get your take on Lazio. I mean, they're a bit of a punching bag here on Studio Inter because if there's a bigger choker in the league than our beloved Nerazzurri, at least in the last few years, it's always been Lazio. This ridiculous run that they're on, both them as a team and Immobile as a striker, as a scorer, Do you reckon that this has got legs to it, or is it just a bubble that's about to burst at any point now?
Yeah, I think I'm in the minority here, but I think there's going to be a point where we have to start seriously considering Lazio in the title race, which sounds crazy. And I completely agree with you. Previous iterations of the Lazio team have been, almost as crazy as Pazza Inter, let's say. But yeah, I think they have a massive test at the weekend. I know they're playing the Coppa Italia in midweek, but if we just concentrate on the league, they have a massive test in the derby, and then they have 3 winnable games, admittedly in the space of 7 days. I think I think they're in it. I think they're still outsiders, but if they were to keep their first team fit for all their big games coming up, I truly think on their day they've shown they can beat anyone, and they seem to have lost that craziness that they had. They seem a lot more sensible. I remember commentating on them when they beat Udinese at home, and it was a very sensible performance. Like, they got the goals, and then they were just content with that to see out the victory comfortable. And okay, it was only Udinese at home, but they've shown in other games that they can also blow teams away. They seem to be able to win in many ways, which I think is sort of a definition of a team that will be in a title race. So I am, from everyone I've spoke to anyway, I'm in the minority, but I really think they're right in it.
Fulvio, did you have a question for Andrew?
Yeah, I have a question for Andrew. First of all, I would like to say to Andrew that I really appreciate and like his nickname on the Twitter, which I think is Maglia Nera, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I appreciate that because it's a fine citation from the Italian cyclism. I'm not into cyclism, but I like this concept of the black shirt, which was once reserved to the last classified of the Giro d'Italia competition. So it's very smart, it's very wise. I like it. And coming to my question. In the last game, Inter had a lot of problem actually, but one of this was the injury of Brozovic. And Brozovic seems that needs to rest like for 1 month. So I was thinking that 1 year ago, it was a common opinion that the Inter team could not play without Brozovic. Now I would like to ask you, coming to this Inter, to the Conte's Inter, how is important Brozovic? How is replaceable Brozovic? And do you think that this injury could count less than 1 year ago? Or do you think that Brozovic is still a crucial and key player also into this version of Inter?
I think it's a case of both. I think he is a very important part of this Inter team, but I don't think it's as big a blow as it would have been last season. And also, maybe if Christian Eriksen is as close to signing as he's supposed to be, that may allow him to come in and then release that extra striker a bit further up the field, which with his signing, I can only assume that is the option, instead of having more 3 flat central midfielders, really playing Christian Eriksen right up ahead, just in behind Lukaku and Lautaro. So Brozovic is certainly, he's that player that keeps it ticking over. But I mean, this season, Sensi and Barella are also 2 players that I think can maybe not cover him because they're slightly different players, but they have a certain strength in that midfield with Sensi and Barella to maybe be able to survive a Brozovic injury, which they couldn't do last season, I think.
Well, I think there's my simple solution to that problem is called Sandro Tonali. Get Sandro Tonali in the summer. Because, if you have Tonali and Eriksen and you have Barella and Sensi, you're covered. Then you don't need anyone. You're sorted for the next decade. The next decade. Mike, do you have a question for Andrew?
Yeah, I want to follow up on Eriksen here. So if Inter pull the trigger and bring in Eriksen, and obviously say if Brozovic is injured for the next month or whatever it may be, when he comes back, what does Inter's starting midfield look like? You know, because you've got then Eriksen, Brozovic, Sensi, Barella. Is there an odd man out? Are you able to start all four? Do you have to, like, who? I mean, do you do a rotation? What's the process? And I mean, maybe it's based on how each player is playing when Eriksen kind of gets molded into the team. But once everything gets going, what would Inter's midfield, their starting midfield, look like if Inter pull the trigger on Eriksen and he comes?
I can't see a situation where you can play all four. I think it has to be three of the four. And yeah, I think it's probably, if you're at home, you're having to take the game to somebody, you know, the likes of Cagliari and Udinese coming up. I think you can afford to have that man further forward in Christian Eriksen and then have probably a Brozovic and either a Barella or Sensi. Whereas, yeah, if maybe you need to be slightly tighter, you can then play Barella, Sensi and Brozovic. I think that's the obvious way it seems to go. I mean, Antonio Conte is far more of a tactical genius than I will ever be. So maybe there's another plan in there, but I can't really see any other beyond those two systems. So you've roughly got the same formation, but Eriksen, he doesn't really sit as a central midfielder per se. He's got to be in that trequartista role and really right up in behind the two strikers. So I think what it does give Inter is it gives them options that maybe they don't have right now to slightly tweak the system. Because Conte is always going to play that same sort of 3-5-2 formation. It's a slight variation of it, and it gives them options. And also, it's the sort of player, if you're chasing a game, there's going to be times in this second half of the season when Inter need a goal, they need to get back into games. If they've started with more of a flat midfield three, then bringing Eriksen on, it provides that extra attacking impetus. So that's how I see it going. Yeah, I can't see it going really any other way, but unless Conte has a sort of tactical masterstroke up his sleeve, I think.
That's a good point. So I wanted to ask you a little bit what your predictions is of this season going forward. Who do you think will win the Scudetto? Who do you think will win the Coppa Italia? Let's start with those two.
I was fearing this question because I've been thinking about this question all week before doing the Lazio. I commentated on the Lazio game at the weekend, and I thought about the title race, and I've pretty much got reasons why all three could win it and reasons why all three could lose it. Maybe slightly less reasons why Juventus could lose it. If I'm going to put my name on a team, I will go for... this is how long I've been thinking of it. I could go boring and say Juventus. I'm probably not what you want to hear on an Inter podcast, but I'm going to go flashy and I'm going to go Lazio. I'll be the one person in the world that believes they can actually win the title.
Fair enough. I can. Okay. What about the Coppa Italia? Who do you think will win that?
The Coppa Italia, I think, will be won by Inter, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on an Inter podcast. I think I do see, I can see Inter building something, both sort of on and off the field. And I think right now they need to win something to get that feeling of winning back. And I think it will be the Coppa Italia. I don't know how they'll do it, but yeah, I think they're going to find a big result somewhere along the way. And yeah, I just think they're going to win it. I can't really express in words exactly how or why, but I think Conte's a winner. I don't think he's going to end the season without a trophy. And yeah, I think it will be the Coppa Italia.
Well, what about, okay, so if you think Lazio will win, then obviously Juventus will join them in the Champions League. Which other two teams do you think will join them in the Champions League as well?
The other two teams, I yeah, it is going to be into Juventus, Lazio, and then you're looking at really Atalanta or Roma. I think at the moment, I would probably go with Roma. I think Atalanta are maybe going to put a lot into their Champions League games. And I think that eventually will just about take its toll. I'm a big fan of how Atalanta play, and I think they enrich the Champions League, but I just think, yeah, Roma might just be a little bit fresher come the end of the season.
I agree. Right. What about? I mean, it's a silly question to ask who will win the Coppa, who will become the Capocannoniere, given that Immobile's average is more than a goal per game. And I think the question I'm going to ask you is: do you think that he will break the record that Gonzalo Higuain equaled a couple of years ago and score more than 36 goals?
Yes, I'm really going out on the ambitious predictions here, and I could look very stupid at the end of the season. But I think in that Lazio team, he's always going to get chances. He's always going to score goals. So he's on 23. He needs another 13 in 19 because they've got the game in hand. Yeah, let's go. Let's say yes. I wasn't expecting to be asked this. I was expecting who was going to win the league, but. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I did the game at the weekend, and he was, he's just incredible. It was 2 penalties, but they're going to keep on getting penalties the way they attack as well. It's no luck really that they keep getting penalties. It's because they spend so long in and around the opposition box. So 36, yes, yeah, I'll say it. He's going to equal 36.
Oh, you say you're going to equal it. Okay. Nice one. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Andrew. We really appreciate it. And if people want to follow you, I think Fulvio, we gave away your handle, but please say it again. And if you got something coming out, feel free to plug it.
It is at Maglianera86, which probably isn't the easiest for any Anglophones trying to type it in, but it's Maglianera is probably how any English speakers would pronounce it. But yeah, I've got a few games coming up. Got the weekend is the Atalanta game, and then I've actually got the Inter game for the Coppa Italia, and then Roma game after that. So yeah, plenty of games coming up. All of them quite interesting and could well be exciting as well. So yeah, and just to say thanks for having me, and yeah, it's been a pleasure talking.
Thanks, Andrew. Take care. Talk to you soon. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Right. Thank you very much to Andrew Pickering there. Well, I thought we'd continue down this path of like a mid-season review here and see where we are with our what we think how Inter has done. I mean, I don't want to dwell too much on the Lecce game, because to me, I think when all of the Italian media say that the refereeing was the worst they've ever seen. I think that's pretty, that says it all. But I think at the end of the day, as Fulvio said, I think we should talk about another Inter crisis. And I would like to ask you to elaborate on that, Fulvio. Is this another Inter crisis in the making, or are we already there, or how do you view this?
I'm not sure we're talking about a crisis here. We are talking about a crisis only if we compare to the outstanding results that we have during the autumn. So we're talking about a crisis because of 4 draws into 7 games, right? So that means that practically in 7 games we made 13 points out of 21, which I think that everybody could. I think everybody could live with that if you told them at the beginning of the season, right? So
yeah.
Now that the expectations are a little bit higher than the beginning of the season, we are practically talking about this. But it's not a crisis. It's just that I think that actually Antonio Conte said everything that needs to be said yesterday, because he said very clearly that if this team is not playing with a rhythm, with a very high rhythm into the game, it's a normal team, and I think that is all. I think that's in this sentence, that's all that we need to know, right? So we know that we are not lucky with the injury. We know that we are achieving these results. So we are still in the title race, and it's end of January. We are achieving this results playing with people like Biraghi, which comes from Fiorentina. It was a team already relegated last year. Vecino, Gagliardini, which I respect, but these are players. Is practically the midfield of Spalletti here, and we played 2 months with the midfield of Spalletti, which was barely enough to achieve the last spot for the Champions League. So I think that something is good here, and I think that it's pretty normal that we achieve draw, and we cannot win all the games. I think it's pretty normal. Said all that, it's painful to see how the draw of Lecce has came, because Inter actually was ahead of Lecce and took the lead. Yeah. Right, and the shameful thing is that Inter took the lead, right, and the big team when they took the lead, it's nearly impossible for a team like Lecce to level this, but for Lecce it was possible. So that's the difference between a normal team that is overperforming and a big team, I think.
I think you brought something which kind of leads me into the next question I wanted everyone to talk about, and that's this mid-season review. Do we think that Antonio Conte's Inter has overperformed, and therefore, the results that we're seeing these past 7 games is more what we can expect from this Inter, or is this the level they're at? I'm curious to hear. What do you think, Mike?
I thought about this, and I don't think Inter have overperformed. I don't think Inter have underperformed. I think they're kind of right where they need to be. When you look at results, they might be a little bit different than what you see on the field. But when you look at the table and you see Inter in second place and they're 4 points back of Juve, and I know that Lazio has a game in hand, but if you would ask everyone at the beginning of the season, is this okay? Maybe not, but I think they've had some really good results this year. I mean, listen, Inter have been in crises. That's a word, crisis. Many times over the last decade, and I don't think this is anywhere near to what we've experienced in the past. 2020. Oh. Inter have, it's not been a disaster of a 2020. Inter have, they won at Napoli. They haven't done that since the Stone Age. I know that. Listen, Inter when they played Atalanta, they probably should have lost that game, but drawing them isn't like a huge issue. No. Beating Cagliari 4-1. I mean, yeah. At Lecce 1-1, but hey, Lecce also drew Juve this year too, so I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. So, look, I don't think that Inter have overachieved, have underachieved. I think Inter have pretty much where I expected them to be. A win and a point back of Juve is kind of I'm okay with it. Yes, Inter were in first place a few weeks ago. I get it. That's why everyone's very negative right now. But this is where they deserve to be, and it's not the worst thing in the world.
Agreed. What about you, Mo? What do you think? Do you think Inter have do you think this contest Inter has overperformed a little bit, or do you think this is where they pretty much should be?
No, look, I think in terms of footballing ability, I mean, what Fulvio said about the midfield for the last 3 months being Spalletti's midfield that barely made it to 4th spot is spot on, So I think, I agree by and large with what Michael said, and we all pretty much predicted Inter to be in the mix right around 2nd or 3rd. So this is really the moment. I think. Again, you've also rightly said that we don't want to dwell on the Lecce game too much, but what bothered me about the last 2 matches is the fact that we drew. It's the manner in which the draws have happened, and it's not because we let go of the lead against Lecce, but the intensity that Conte was talking about after the game was lacking. The intensity with which, Inter blew everyone away in the first half of the season in the autumn spell. That really felt like it was missing in the Sassuolo game, in the Barca game away at the Camp Nou in the first half. So I felt like that might be why I'm more disappointed rather than by the results, but in the manner of which the players went out to try and take the points. I don't think it's a crisis. I don't think the team is overachieved or underachieved. In agreement with Michael, I think it could be a crisis, but I think it's also very remediable because it's not for lack of. With Barella and Sensi back, it's not for lack of talent in the selectable squad, but it's more a lack of maybe ambition and desire. And if there's one thing that Conte is going to be able to do is, under the players' bums and make sure they come out against Cagliari, with all
guns blazing,
whatever,
yeah.
Guns blazing, all cylinders firing, whatever metaphor you want to use. But so not to be too long-winded, but I think, and I agree with both Fulvio and Michael in that it's not really a crisis at the moment, and I'm pretty much content with where we are.
I mean, I just add to that personally, I think Inter's Conte has overperformed in the sense that in terms of points tally, I did not expect him to have this many points at this, at this stage in the season. But if you look at the position in the league, second, third is pretty much what I expected them to do. I think maybe a few points too many, but but that's about it. Other than that, to call this a crisis would be silly. I mean, let's be honest. We can't call it a crisis now, because Inter are where they are, and it's like Fulvio said, we have 7 draws, and we have 13 points out of 21 in January, December for Inter. That's like winning. That's like winning. I don't know. That's like winning every game. So I don't have for me, I don't think they've overperformed maybe in terms of points, but not in positioning. That's where I'm at on that. What about if I asked you all quickly, who do you all think has been Inter's best player and why? I'll start with you, Fulvio. So far.
I thought a lot about this because there was a lot of players into the nomination for this. But I think that if I make a fair analysis, I think that the best player for Inter so far has been Stefan De Vrij. Because the guy actually never made any error, never made any mistake, any foul, and even when the team is not okay, is not in the best shape, is not in the best day, you can always count on him, right? And even yesterday, even in the game against Lecce was, I think, easily one of the best players aligned by Inter. And I keep a bit surprised at this, but actually not so surprised because I know the value of the player, and is a lot undervalued because nobody from Italian media never told that this is one of the best player into Serie A so far, and it's the truth. I mean, true. And yeah, so I would go with him because actually it's you cannot tell anything to De Vrij. Never made any error during any of the game that he played. Never.
And he defends like the classic Italian elegant defenders. Like the way he moves on the pitch, he's such an elegant defender. Like the way he passes, the way he moves, the way he reads the game. He reminds me, his movement on the pitch reminds me a little bit of Alessandro Nesta when he was at his best. This elegance. And I've only ever seen that in Italian defenders. I've never seen that in a non-Italian defender. Mo?
He's got an economy of motion, he's never all over the place, never needs to do a last ditch tackle. Just like you say, very elegant.
Very elegant, and it's this kind of like he plays like a libero almost. If we don't have that anymore. but it's gorgeous. No, I think it's really nice to see. So Mo, while we're on the topic and you're on it, who's your best player of the season so far?
I have to admit,
Handanovic?
Handanovic. No, I have to say I had intended. It was a difficult toss-up. I had intended to possibly give a shout out to De Vrij, but seeing that Fulvio spoke so well about him, I think. I mean, the obvious candidates for me, other than De Vrij, would be Lukaku. And I mean, I understand that Lautaro has also had a breakout season up front, and it's not for the goals. What I appreciate the most about Lukaku's presence is how he's made us completely forget about the Icardi crisis, and
Completely.
transform. Yeah, it's not for the goals. The goals are the goals. I mean, the goals. Lautaro scored amazing goals, but just the general mood of the club, no acrimony. We have a bit of a higher profile in Europe. The bromance with Lautaro, just the whole thing. And I wasn't keen on Lukaku coming that much, I have to admit, but I've been completely won over, and I think, thank you very much for the goals. They're lovely. We really appreciate them all, but more importantly, the off the pitch or off the ball sentiment and general contribution to the squad. I think this is why I think I have to shout out Big Rom.
Yeah, and for me, we were told by the English media and everyone watching the Premier League, and also when watching Lukaku in the Premier League, he can't hold up the ball. His link-up play is poor. His first touch is awful. Well, not at Inter, hasn't. I mean, his link-up play is absolutely world-class. He's brilliant at holding up the ball. His movement, his intelligence, and he's been an absolutely world-class striker. It's so nice to see. And as you say, the off-field stuff. I mean, when he gave that penalty to Sebastiano Esposito, and the way he's handled himself when being attacked in the media attacked, these racist attacks by idiots at the stadiums, and also let's not forget some so-called journalists in the Italian media who come with racist bullshit against him. He handles it with such incredible class, and that is I agree with you. I think he's really, you can understand why Antonio Conte has been begging to work with this guy for such a long time. I can completely understand that. He's such a class act. Mike, who do you think has been the best player of the season?
Well, I think Mo made a really good point there, and Lukaku has made us forget about Icardi, and I didn't really think about that until right now. I'm I see Icardi's statistics and his highlights of his goals, but really I've just kind of forgotten about that whole disaster last year, and it's mainly because Lukaku has stood in for him so well. And Nima, we talked about this many times before, right when they made the signing. I didn't like it. I thought they paid way too much for him, and he's proven me wrong, and I'm ecstatic about it. But that being said, I mean, this is obviously a very difficult choice for Inter's best player. Lukaku's right up there. I think if Sensi hadn't got injured, I think maybe he would have been my choice, but that kind of set him back. But I have to say it's been Stefan De Vrij. Like he's been rock solid. At the back. I really can't even think of any goals he's been responsible for at the back. Maybe one the entire season. It's just like he's been so consistent. Positioning is solid. You can tell he communicates really, really well with Skriniar and Godin. I have to say that he's been the most consistent and our best player, not by much, but if I had to choose, it's got to be him.
I hate to change the subject, but right now, Piero Ausilio told Sky Sport Italia that, and I quote, "We have just made an official bid to Tottenham to sign Christian Eriksen, and now we're waiting. Many clubs are interested, but we are confident in trying to get a top player like Christian Eriksen," end of quote. Right. I agree with everything you guys just said. But for me, and I'm not being facetious, and I'm not having a wind up here, against Mo, but I honestly think Handanovic has been our best player, and not just because of, I think he's been all the mistakes that he's been accused of doing in the past, he's not done this season. He's owned the penalty area, and he finally has a world-class defense in front of him, and he can now he lifts them even higher by making these insane saves that he's doing, and I think he is by far the best goalkeeper in the Serie A, not even close right now. So for me, it's what's really what makes me so happy is that all of us have different players almost, and that just goes to show how good this Inter has been, and that is also worth noting, because in the previous seasons, it was always it's Icardi, it's Handanovic, you know what I mean? Because everyone else have been so poor, but now there's so many players that are so good that we actually have trouble finding players to say that have been the best. But for me, it's been Handanovic. I think De Vrij and those guys have been also great. But I think, to me, his contributions have been winning points that have really caught my eye. Well, what about if we turn the dial on that, turn the other side, the negativity on that? Who do you think has been the worst player, Fulvio?
Well, easy. This is an easy call, and I go for Politano, of course. Probably not because it's his fault. Probably because the change of the style of play actually has depotentiate him in some way. But also, I have to say that he's probably the only player into the Inter squad that has not improved anything since the last year, right? Because if you think about Candreva, if you think about Lautaro Martinez, which, by the way, we did not mention into the best player, but I think it's worth a mention because it's the most improved player compared to the last season. If you think about all this player, and then if you look at Politano, practically you have this flavor that you're looking at this exactly same player, right? With the same style of play, not capable to change his style, not capable to change his skills, and I'm not surprised that at some point he needs to go away, right? Because he needs to go ahead with his career into a team that fits well for him, and is not Inter at the moment. It's not probably is not a team that wants to aim for achieving great trophies or something like that. So I wish all the best to Politano, but I have to say he was the worst player of the Inter squad so far.
For me, it's Cristiano Biraghi, because I think I expected so much when he came. I was so happy when Inter got him. He's he's from Milan. He used to stand in the Curva. His family are all, Inter fans. He came up through the Inter youth ranks. He was good at Pescara. He went to Fiorentina, became a national team player. And then he came to Inter, and they loan swapped him with Dalbert, and I was like, finally, he's a left-footed wing back. He can finally he can maybe resolve that issue, and he's been absolutely atrocious. And I'm so upset about that because I really wanted him to do well. I really, really, really wanted him to do well, but it is what it is. What about Mo? Who do you think has been the worst player?
So an old fan favorite, I think it's Antonio Candreva, and not because he didn't have quite a strong start to the season, and I recognize that, but I think he tricked us all into thinking that he's this reformed phoenix risen from the ashes, etc. And then he's just been very, very pedestrian and mediocre. He was absolutely awful against Lecce and Atalanta. So I think what upset me is that Candreva started the season off so brightly with so much promise, and then it seems like we're having just as much trouble on the right flank as we are on the left in the absence of Santo Danilo. So at this point in time, I'm most disappointed in Candreva.
Fair enough. Mike, who's been your biggest? Who do you think has been the worst player so far this season?
Well, this was a toss-up between Politano and Biraghi, so it was, for all the reasons that you guys already mentioned. But at the same time, I want to go. Going back to October, we did a Studio Inter podcast, and I said I want to see more from Politano because he didn't have that bad of a start of the season. But I said I really want to see more of him, and then he got some looks, and ever since I mentioned I wanted to see more of him, he has been an absolute disaster. And I don't know if it's I jinxed him or someone was trying to go at me, but like I honestly feel that he's such a great attacking player, but maybe it just doesn't fit with Inter and Conte. I don't know where that is. I feel that he would have success for another team, but ever since October, whenever he's on the field, I just can't really think of anything positive he's done for the team, and for that reason, I'd probably go Politano. Although Biraghi, my goodness, he had a nice assist against Lecce, but all season long, it's just I don't see that attacking, mindful player that we need on the wing, and he's not that player. And maybe that's why we've picked up Ashley Young. I don't know, but that's I go Politano slightly over Biraghi.
Good shout. Right. Let's move on to which player that has surprised you the most positively. I'll start with you, Mike.
Well, if you asked me in, I'd say late September, I would have said Candreva. But as Mo mentioned, since then it's not been that good at all. His first 4 to 6 games, he was playing out of his mind, and I was really excited because last season Candreva was by far for me our worst player. So he started off the season so well. I'm like, okay, this is a new Candreva. This is great, and then all of a sudden he just fell off a cliff. So I mean, had this been in September, October, I would have said Candreva, but Lukaku has been the surprise for me. I just really didn't think that this is what we were going to get out of him. He's from what he's done, scoring the goals, but not only that, but off the ball, is using his physical presence. I can't tell you how many times we've seen Lukaku use his body to shield the ball or just basically move guys off the ball. And that's what I really, really like from him and what I've seen from him so far. So I didn't expect Lukaku to have this big of a presence for us. And I think he's our biggest surprise.
I'll just quickly then, who do you think has been the most negative surprise? Mike.
Negative surprise. I mean,
well, who surprised you negatively this season?
Well, I mean, you can go back to Biraghi in that situation. I was really happy to have him back, and it's not that player that we kind of expected he would be, this bad. I mean, you can go back and say, he's been our worst player, but he's also been the worst surprise negatively as well, because I think we had expectations that this could finally solve one of our wingback situations, because we haven't had good wingbacks since Maicon and Zanetti. So it's just like, no, that's the negative surprise, and it's disappointing because I really thought that we had made that improvement, and clearly we haven't.
I agree. For me, I have both. The positive surprise has been Lukaku for me, because of what we said, and the fact that he has this aspect of his game that we were told that he hadn't, and Biraghi for the same reason. I'm with you on both of those. Fulvio, what about you? Which player has surprised you positively and negatively, and why?
So the positive surprise name of the guy is Alessandro Bastoni. This for me is incredible, because at the beginning of the season, I tend to believe that a 20-year-old defender was impossible to put into a strong defense. We already knew that we have a strong defense, and we have Diego Godin added, which was top class, world class player, and I think he still is. But when you sign a player like this, you always believe that he's going to be line up each and every game. So I would never expect this from Alessandro Bastoni, but I discover and I found out that he's a very consistent player, and no matter if he made some mistakes at some point, because he's young and he needs to make some mistake, but I think that the quality of this player is outstanding, And I think that he could deserve the national Italian team for the Euro 2020. And I hope that Mancini keep him into consideration, because you have not saw this large amount of Italian defenders into the team. So this is so far the most positive surprise, and I think that Bastoni can be considered during the second part of the season as one of the key players of Inter at some point. I'm pretty sure about that. And about the negative surprise, it's a difficult toss here, because I cannot say that anybody has surprised me negatively speaking, because of course for Biraghi you always said that you expect a lot from him, but I didn't expect anything, to be honest, right? I knew him from Fiorentina, and I knew that he was a pretty average mid-table Serie A side back. No, really, you cannot retrieve my tweet because they're not available anymore. But I said it.
Hashtag Michael.
Yeah, I actually wrote it. I wrote it. So don't expect anything from Biraghi, because it's a signing that we need to line up a side back that is useful for the list as well, and is grown up in Inter and useful for the list, and that's all, right? But I would say that
he plays for the national team as well. That's why, I mean, he was starting for the national team as a fullback.
Actually, now that the national team is practically playing with is playing with Emerson Palmieri, right, at the moment, which is not Italian on the paper, but still it's the best shot that Italy had on that place. Yeah, but the thing is that you have not alternatives, right? Alternatives are the Sciglio probably, so same level, right? It's a lack of the role. But go ahead on your question. I probably would say that the negative surprise could be Alexis Sanchez. And I'm not speaking about a negative surprise, because I mean that what we are seeing from him was the worst case scenario when we signed that. Still worst, but some way expectable. The only thing is that I knew that this was a bet. I risk bet, and I knew that, but also I could expect at this point something more than practically 3 games played, right? Because he played on the Camp Nou, and he played a very good first half against Sampdoria, then red card, was disqualified against Juventus, and then he got injured. And so we're talking about 3 games, and we are at the end of January. It's negative, right? It's negative because you see that you have the proof now that the player is not. You cannot count on him, and it's a shame if you remember what Alexis Sanchez actually was.
Very good point, Fulvio. Very good point. Mo, what about you? Positive, negative surprises.
Positive surprise has to be Stefano Sensi for me. I know he's been out injured for a hot minute, but honestly, like the big marquee midfield signing was Barella. Sensi kind of slipped in under the radar. I have to admit, I hadn't seen much of him in Sassuolo. So I did not expect. I didn't expect the level of performance from this guy. He was in the start of the season absolutely phenomenal, fantastic. So for me, that remains to be the biggest surprise. I'd say negative surprise is Politano, because it was clear that Conte's Midas touch was particularly aligned with the Italian players. He was able to create Bastoni, reform Candreva, albeit for a short while. Gagliardini also improved his output. And I really expected more from Politano. And like Michael had alluded to earlier, it's not for lack of chances. He'd been given chances, and every time he came onto the pitch, it was as if he hadn't received any instructions at all, and he's just doing the same old garbage, cutting in from the right flank, trying to take shots, not participating in play. And it all seemed to me not lack of talent, but lack of desire to follow a game plan or be part of the team, just prove himself individually rather than aid the squad. And that mentality for me was quite surprising, because he had been very, very promising under Spalletti last year, and very well integrated with the squad. And to me, the fact that he seems to always be almost like a satellite when he comes onto the pitch, not part of the core team, is just very, very surprising for me.
Let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and or criticize something or someone in the world of football, starting with the positive stuff. This week's Moratti, which will be presented by Mr. Mo Nassar.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of this qualities.
Yeah, so it's a tough week for positivity. So I'd like to do a bit of a meta shout out or a meta nomination by selecting grumpy old Nima and myself as the Morattis of the week for not having jumped on the Inter for the Scudetto bandwagon earlier in the season,
yes,
being well documented on more than one occasion, saying we'll only believe in April. that's the cut-off time. And it's not to say that, it's I'm, at least not me, like I don't believe or don't have the desire to believe, but yeah, no, I mean, it was far too good, far too soon. So I still don't think it's a crisis, but I think at least now expectations are a bit tempered. Yeah,
we're back on planet Earth. I agree.
Exactly.
Let's move on to something much more negative. This week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Michael Gallo.
My Moggi of the week. Well, I'm going to say Moggi of the month because it happened about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Okay. Forgive me if I'm getting this guy's name right. Sky Sports reporter Kave Solhekol. Is that how you say his name?
I think that's really good. He's of Iranian descent. Kave Solhekol. So I think that was pretty all right.
Okay.
Yeah,
so he is the Moggi of the week, of the month, probably of the decade, for his comments that he said that Tottenham is a bigger club than Inter Milan. And they were discussing the Christian Eriksen moving from Spurs to Inter, and he came on. He's like, why would Christian Eriksen go from Spurs to Inter? And I'm thinking, okay, why wouldn't he? Well, his reasons were Spurs have a better stadium. Okay, they are a richer club. They went further in the Champions League last season. They have Jose Mourinho. So why would Eriksen go to Italy when Juve are favorites? I cannot comprehend the bias from these points. Like, would any of these points make a player's decision to go from one team to the other because they have a better stadium, because they're a richer club? Like, I couldn't comprehend it. And then I'm thinking, okay, Tottenham is a bigger club than Inter Milan. Okay, sure. So Inter Milan has 18 league titles, 3 Champions League titles. Tottenham has 0 league titles, 0 Champions League titles. So they're a bigger club, right? Okay. Right now, Inter 4 points back of first place in Serie A. Tottenham, now get ready for this one. Tottenham, 33 points back of first place. They only have 31 points total. So they're more points back of Liverpool than they actually have points, and they're in 8th place. So this guy's trying to say that Tottenham is a bigger club than Inter Milan, and they have a better situation at Spurs than it is at Inter. No, thank you. Terrible take. And I never want to listen to another word this guy says ever again.
I don't know what this guy. I mean, he's been very overtly critical about Inter. Generally, like his ranting about when Inter wanted to get paid for Perisic. He's been ranting about Inter, from several years now. I don't know what this guy's got against Inter, but it's really, really silly to say that. Sorry, Fulvio, go.
Yeah, no. I just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just came in my mind something about Tottenham that I saw on the social network. I remember probably it was Twitter, like 2 or 3 months ago, and there was this 3 or 4 Tottenham players. I remember Harry Kane, I remember Lamela, right, in a photo, in a picture, and the tweet said, "How do you call this guys if they wear a musical group, right?" And I remember that probably was a Manchester United fan that practically quoted this tweet and boom the web, because he told, "My name for these guys is Imagine Trophies."
That's good.
I mean,
the real name was Imagine Dragons, but actually it was Imagine Trophies.
But I'm glad you brought that up, Fulvio, because it's kind of ridiculous that he were to talk about a bigger club. The Inter is a bigger club than the Tottenham are a bigger club than Inter, because since 1991, the last time that Tottenham won the FA Cup, and that's the major trophy. No, I do not count the League Cup as a major trophy. But since 1991, Inter have won 3 Europa Leagues, 3 UEFA Cups, 1 Champions League, and 5 Serie A titles. Like, what are you talking about? They have a new stadium. That's the definition of how a club is bigger. Like, what? No, it's just embarrassing that someone calls themselves an expert and then has absolutely no clue whatsoever what they're talking about. And this isn't the first time that this comes from that, And again, this isn't against Tottenham fans. This isn't a dig on Tottenham. Actually, most Tottenham fans found that pretty offensive because it's not true. Inter won the Champions League in 2010. We have 4 European titles since the last time Tottenham won an actual major trophy. So no, just stop embarrassing yourself. Right, let's move on to this to something much more comical. This week's Frog, which I'll be presenting myself.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
So this week's Frog has to go to a journalist on Twitter called Alistair Gold. He covers Tottenham for Football London, and he tweeted out a thread about Dimitar Berbatov that I'm going to read verbatim because it's absolutely brilliant. Dimitar Berbatov is still very much a rebel. He came into the media cafe at Spurs about 10 minutes before kickoff looking for food. He grabbed a sandwich roll, but the catering manager came over and asked him where his pre-match meal voucher was. All the media get given one. While his colleague argued his case, having taken one himself, explaining who the Bulgarian was, Berbatov casually buttered his roll, stuffed the whole thing into his mouth, and stood in front of the woman with it hanging half out, as if to say, "What are you going to do now?" This sent the catering manager to a new level of anger or outrage at this Bulgarian and his devil-may-care attitude. While she raged, Berbatov simply smiled with buttered bread still hanging out of his mouth before walking out of the room. And he ends it with Dimitar Berbatov doing what he wants since 1981. That I don't think we need to explain why that is the Frog of the Week, and that situation is just simply brilliant. Right, I'd like to thank Andrew Pickering and Mo for coming on this week's show. I'd like to thank you for listening. Also, thank you for coming on, Fulvio. Don't be a stranger.
Yes, thank you very much, Nima. I will try my best to be here as soon as I can.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike.
You're very welcome. Another game against Cagliari. It feels like we just played them, and that's coming up this Sunday. So hopefully a big 3 points on the weekend.
Absolutely, which we'll discuss next week. And until next week, my name is Nima Tavallaey, wishing you all a good week, happy weekend, and 3 points. And until next time, sempre e solo Forza Inter.